This is the first promoter we've had on the podcast. We've had matchmakers, both Rob and Lance. We've had commentators like Jeremy Johnson. But you are the first promoter we've had on the podcast. So, Marlene, thank you for being in.
Thank you for having me. I've been watching. I'm a big fan, so.
Oh, well, thank you. We were talking off the record that right now, I'm sure by the time this episode will post, you'll probably maybe post the video, but you guys recorded the awards show thing today for the 2024 year.
Yeah. Thank goodness for my team, man, because they do a lot of the stuff. We talk about it, and then they make it happen, and I don't have too much to go into it, just some opinions, really, and couldn't speak enough for my team, Lance,
You talking about production
Matt,
and all the other guys? Yeah.
Lance and all them. They really make it happen, so I'm excited about that.
I wanted to talk about that briefly, if you don't mind, outside of just the production stuff, between Danny and Lance and the Matts, you kind of have... it's a promotion, yeah, but there's almost these subgroups, right? So the Mats would be the production side, everything that people quote unquote see in terms of, the pay-per-view, the graphics, all that stuff that has to happen beforehand, setting up for weigh-ins and stuff, the cameras, things like that. Lance, obviously the matchmaker, all the things that he has to do beforehand and sometimes all up way until the card, right? When Sam Penites needed an opponent and found Shane Moffitt. Then you got guys Danny, who I'm not really sure what Danny's affiliation with the promotion is, but he's just kind of like an extra media guy, right? Doing the red carpet show beforehand, doing some interviews and stuff like that. Your events have just a lot of people from different walks doing a lot of jobs. Was that always how you envisioned having the promotion?
I wouldn't say that it was always how we have envisioned it, but we've always just tried to do something more every show, something more. What can we do to add to the production value? Production is one of our biggest attributes for NFA, I would say. So, we always wanted to add more to the show, add more value to sponsors, add more and more, always putting back into the show. So that's kind of how we've grabbed these people to add to the show and to add different looks, whether that be, more of a professional look or just kind of that grabbing somebody from the crowd and talking to people, or grabbing a fighter and talking to them and just, hey, how you doing? What do you got going on? Type stuff. It's just always adding to it. That's kind of where we've been just trying to be.
You guys had, would it be fair to say, humble beginnings compared to where you're at now in terms of the promotion? You guys have been in business for 5 years now?
Well, NFA has been in existence since 2012.
Yeah.
We bought it in 2018. We bought the name and basically the little catalog that it had.
When you say catalog, you mean the fights that they have already produced, whatever they had.
Yeah, so we got all that. There was nothing else.
When did you buy it? What year?
January of 2018.
Okay, so I was close. 5 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Forgive me. When I said you guys have been in...
Yeah.
I meant since you and Brad kind of took over.
Yeah. So we've been 5 years. We started out, and honestly, our intention when we started out was to be an amateur promotion only. So, unfortunately, that didn't really last very long because shortly after we bought, I want to say early 2019 is when the state took over amateur MMA, and at that point, it didn't really make a lot of sense to be amateur only. It cost the same amount to do pros as it did to just do an amateur show, and there were some technicalities for just amateur, so we're like, what's the point of not doing it now?
Can we dive into that just a little bit more for context? So when you say that you guys, when you first got NFA, wanted to be known as the amateur promotion, can you explain to me why you wanted that? So besides the state and everything, we'll get to that portion, but when you guys started with it, what was the attraction to just do only amateur?
I I mean, at the time, our goal was just to kind of build those amateurs to be able to go to the pro promotions here in our area or within Missouri and have that experience already before they're going to the pros, and to have the knowledge and the know what to do and how to be a fighter or a pro fighter. So we just kind of wanted to start at the bottom and build those fighters up, build their following, build those kinds of things. And that's kind of where we started. I don't know that there was any other why to that, but that's kind of just what we thought we wanted to start at.
That was the niche you were trying to kind of
Yeah.
fill. Just wanted to take a second to pause the action and just tell you guys thank you so much for consuming our content. Easy Talk is a passion project. This podcast is just a bunch of like-minded people coming together to produce some cool stuff and talk to some cool people. One of the things I would very much appreciate is if you could possibly like the video or subscribe to the channel, just because it helps us in the algorithm and ultimately to grow, to get more exposure to everybody, including ourselves, and ultimately just make a better product. Take a second, I'd greatly appreciate it, and on with the show. And then I know that there was legislation passed in the state of Missouri that essentially, I'm going to try to do this as best I can, forgive me. It used to be that MMA was like the wild, wild west. Like when I first was coming up back in 2010, 2011.
Way back, yeah.
Even the pros, I mean, you could have professional bouts that were never sanctioned, that didn't have any sort of insurance. They used to call them like the bar burners, or like the behind the alley fights, right? Mm-hmm. There was fights at like strip clubs and stuff like that. I mean, like everything that you could possibly tell from like these old time movies, a lot of that actually existed.
Oh yeah.
Like my very first fight, we didn't even make weight. Like we basically people were picked based on like height and size and like how long they've been training. And coming from wrestling, where if you missed weight by like 0.1, you couldn't wrestle. My mind was like blown.
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy. This is the Wild West, you know? But in that short amount of time, I then saw, the state athletic commission get more and more involved. At first, it was like with the professional ranks. It used to be that you could outsource the sanctioning bodies to private industries, right? Like there was like BMF Inspire that used to sanction fights, and under them you would get the things of like, the referees, the judges, things like that, along with the insurance claims, right? So like as a fighter, when you fight, you have insurance for that event. If something happens to you, God forbid, you at least know that you can go to the hospital and get, some care. Fast forward now to the year of our Lord, 2024. I mean, it has essentially been all but eclipsed now. The State Athletic Commission takes over all of it. That amateurs are basically... I don't really feel like there's any sort of difference between the amateurs and pros now in the sense of what the state views, because they both need licenses, they both need the physicals. I believe they all need blood work as well.
No, that's the only difference.
Just the blood
Amateurs do not require blood work.
Okay. Well, they need at least...
By the state.
Yeah.
Now, we as a promotion require blood work for everybody. So NFA requires it for everybody, but the state does not require blood work for amateurs,
but they do it for pros.
Pro. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that caveat.
But that's literally the only difference in, there's a little difference in rule sets and time of bouts and things like that, but as far as anything else, that's the only difference.
Yeah, I know that you can't really have laissez-faire too, because when I fought for Fight Hard as an amateur, some of my amateur championship bouts, one of them we did 5 3-minute rounds, and for one of them we did 3 4-minute rounds. Like you can kind of play around with it as long as they weren't 3 5s or 5 5s, if that makes sense. But then once the state got involved, I don't think you can do that stuff anymore.
You cannot. I wish you could. I get asked a lot about 3 5-minute rounds for title fights, things, and
for amateurs.
For amateurs, yeah, or 5
3-minute rounds. That makes more sense. Yeah,
5 3-minute rounds, and
the state doesn't do it.
No, which I don't know why, because technically the rule is that they can't fight more than 15 minutes, which that kind of fits in there, but I've been told no.
Maybe it's like equal to
maybe
or greater
it's a
than.
total including the minute between.
All right, so then 3 2-minute 59-second rounds.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why, but I was told no, and I said okay.
So you were talking about how you started as an amateur only promotion, but then when the legislation kind of changed in the state of Missouri to increase the purview of the state to the amateurs as well, it kind of forced your hand.
Yeah.
You guys were like, well, if we're going to be paying for the state to kind of sanction these fights, might as well have some pro fights as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It was honestly, it was mainly about cost. So it was gonna cost the same amount um, to have pros as to not have pros, which was quite a bit more than what we were paying for just amateurs. So that's where we wanted to start at like just a couple pros. You know, we really only do three, maybe four. Four has probably been our max pros on a card at any one time. So we still don't do a ton of pros, just for the simple fact that I like to focus on the amateurs and build those amateur guys up. So we still don't do a ton of pros, but we do a lot more pros than what we clearly did.
How much did you work with the state before that legislation passed versus after?
0.
You didn't work with the state at all, so like,
No. Like I knew that there was a law coming probably 3 or 4 months beforehand, but by that time it was written, everything was done before I could really have any input on it.
if you could, what would be the input that you would have wanted to have on it?
Blood work for amateurs.
Oh, so you would have wanted to extend that as well.
Yeah. I would have that was really the only issue that I had with the law was I think blood work is important for all the fighters personally. It's just it's a risky sport, so you don't want to take any more risks than you have to. So
And you have a lot of people coming from a lot of different walks of life, and you don't want to necessarily assume that everyone is operating in good faith.
and you know, a lot of the fighters don't know. There's been multiple. The blood work program has caught multiple issues for fighters that they didn't know that they had whatever it was that they
Wow.
had
I
through the
didn't think
blood
about
work.
that.
But
The ignorance.
yeah, they just, they came from whatever walks of life that was, and they're like, I guess they maybe thought there was a chance, but never needed to or wanted to find out. So there's been several fighters that have, gotten tested, um, gotten the
Results.
treatment, and then they are good to go now should they want to fight again. So
God bless.
I mean, in the long run, that's your life. So some of those are deadly diseases that you could get.
Yeah. I didn't think about that, but now that you say that, it makes a sense. And I remember when I had Dr. Munchie on, one of the things he did say was he loves doing like being the fight doc and all that stuff, and he loves this sport and the world in general. But one of the things that did kind of make him sad was like the lack of the umbrella of care for some of these fighters, because obviously there's a certain correlation or connotation between like fighters and like where they are socioeconomically. A lot of people with affluence and means don't necessarily get attracted to this world, so a lot of times it's the people that don't necessarily have the most avenues, right? And in doing so, you might get people that are underinsured, possibly don't have insurance whatsoever. Maybe they, work gig, like they're in the gig economy. They don't really have careers that can offer them health insurance. So Dr. Munchie was talking about when he's doing the physicals and all these other things, these might be the first time these guys see a doctor that year.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say that probably most fighters at our level probably don't have adequate insurance, if insurance at all.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for the doctors in our St. Louis area, our fight docs, because they are the best of the best. I couldn't say anything better. Macklin, Munchie, all of those guys that, they do blood work at low cost. They do stitches after the show, so you don't have to go to the hospital to do that. They do all
Dr.
those
Munchie
things.
came to work. After my last fight, I needed like stitches on my head and on my face. When it came time to remove the stitches, he came to my work to remove them. So shout out to Dr. Munchie. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I've had Macklin so a fighter was sent to the ER to get some stitches in Iowa, and they came back and they were atrocious. Macklin brought him into his office and redid all the stitches on a fighter. So like,
Wow.
yeah, the fight docs here in St. Louis really care about the fighters here. You know, they go above and beyond more than what I probably have seen anywhere, and I do travel a lot to watch some fights, so I think they're the best.
Yeah, shout out to both of those guys. I know that all the fighters and everybody in the world kind of appreciates that, and I don't think it does get enough kind of like recognition.
No.
So shout out to you both, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Macklin is actually one of the people I want to have on the podcast too, but he gave me some homework. I have to read his book first, so I'll get around to it, man. I'll get around to it. I just don't have the. I just wish people understood. So I will read it. I promise. I'm curious because, and I don't want to talk about what you do for your own work, because obviously the money regarding a professional promotion or an amateur promotion doesn't necessarily correlate to a full-time job usually, right? So like you have a day job yourself, which
I do.
The comparison to fighters is pretty keen there, because I know a lot of fighters that don't make enough money just fighting. They also have day jobs. So it's funny that the promoters are kind of on that same boat. You work in the public sector and in the private sector. Private sector for the promotion, public sector for what you do day to day. Was it interesting for you on a personal level to see how legislation, regulation, and all these other things can affect you, a business owner at the time, before and after, kind of compare and contrast?
Oh yeah, I mean even today, again, there's been some changes in the way the state is doing licensing now. So it went into effect last week.
What is the change?
January 14th it went into effect. So all the licensing, they got a new program. So the state, they're going to be doing any licensing will not be done at weigh-ins. It will be done online. You have to pay online. Filling out your physicals and stuff.
So you
online,
have to have it all done beforehand.
Bout agreements online. Everything is going to be through the state portal online.
So what happens when a fighter comes in on like a day's notice to save a fight, but they don't necessarily have all that stuff done?
I mean, I think there'll be exceptions.
Yeah, okay, so they leave a certain caveat out.
Yeah, and especially right now, it's a work in progress. Like everything with working with government, it's a work in progress. So there's lots of kinks to work out. I myself was on the phone with Tim last week probably 4 times. I'm like, I know I'm not stupid. I really can't figure this out. Something has to be a problem.
Theory and application, man. Those two things. It sounds great in theory until you got to do it. It's also tough whenever you have like a definitive date. You're like, okay, now we're going to change it. It's like, dude, I always liked that, when the Model T came out, the first like automobile for public consumption, there were at one point horses and cars using the same streets. And that transition kind of happened naturally between, okay, we're going to get rid of horses and go to cars. It wasn't just like, okay, this definitive date, you can't ride horses anymore. I like when you allow for people to kind of migrate on their own, because then you can also get the kinks out in the meantime. You know what I mean? If it is very difficult to work this online portal or whatever, maybe it's because they didn't set it up right. Maybe the issue was, them putting it together. They're going to need some time to get the kinks out, work out all the bugs, and maybe also optimize, right? So whenever you have something as definitive as legislation as well, you got to really have your ducks in the order, because now you're putting that onus on the people.
It's from what I'm hearing from Tim with the way that they're doing, they moved over to this program, and then other legislation that is passed. It is gonna affect like MMA licensing to a detriment, because a lot of that legislation clearly wasn't thinking about licensing MMA or licensing something, a sport that has a worldwide impact. I mean, even us, a small promotion in St. Louis, we've brought in people from Dominican Republic or out of the country who don't live here, so they're not U.S. citizens. So some of that legislation is going to affect the licensing of non-U.S. citizen fighters.
That's got to be rough, too, when you're talking about internationally? Because then you got to get the federal government involved with like visas and stuff like that, right?
Um, Luckily, the ones that we have dealt with have already had their
Oh, thank
visas,
God.
so I didn't have to do
Do
any of
all
that.
that?
But I do have a close manager who he has been rocking it out getting visas for his guys to come over from the Middle East and different things. He's whatever he's doing has been successful, and kudos to him, man.
Good.
It's
He's earning his 15%.
I hope that's what he's getting.
What did you think about the world of mixed martial arts before you got involved in it, in terms of the promotion? Because obviously you guys were fans of this sport. So before we talk about the transition of like once you got into the business of mixed martial art, can you just tell me what you thought about mixed martial arts before you got inundated with this side of it?
I mean, really, we've always been fans. So we did a lot of in the area working with promotions as a sponsor because Brad's a realtor. So we've always been a fan of MMA. So why not be able to write it off?
Yeah.
It's kind of the way we thought about it. So we sponsored events so that we could go. So we were working with promoters to kind of just sponsor, be
Help
able to
them
do
out
what we
financially.
like. Yeah.
You were going to go to the events
Sponsors.
anyway.
Right. I was going to pay to go anyway. Why not write it off on our taxes? So we started out in that, and then really moving over to the promoting side, I knew nothing. Not anything. You know, we had some friends in the state, and then with Spire, who we used for our sanctioning when we started. So we had some friends, so they helped like give us the basics, but it's really been, you know, just kind of that
Learn as you go.
figured out type that's I'm just kind of okay, now what are we going to do next? So
Was it a lot more than you thought it would be in terms of like just like the nuance?
you know, it didn't start out that way.
Okay.
It didn't start out that way. You know, when we were just doing it's probably our first year when we were in the Eagles Hall, and we just paid a guy to stand on the perch and record, and that's literally all it was, and we paid somebody to do some photos, and that's literally all we did. Those were much simpler times. Much simpler times, but all the nuances now, you know, we have teams of people. I think I was looking at the last show we did, we probably have 80 to 100 people that are working for us on fight night.
Wow.
It's a lot more than even I thought.
That's insane.
And when
Not
I say
insane in a bad way.
working, it's not, some are volunteering for us even, so it's not like.
Does that 100 include like the venue staff?
No.
No, so
That's just us.
between like what, like state, commentary, interviewers.
Our cage crew,
Oh yeah,
production
all the people
crew.
you never see until before and after.
Yeah, like all of our admin people that are checking in fighters, running fighters, gloving fighters, you know, everybody out front that's making sure that all of our
Everything's
sponsors are
kosher.
good, that the venue's happy, that there's so many people that you wouldn't even think of, that I unfortunately just don't think of when I'm thinking about these things. It's a lot now. It's a lot of people.
From the first show to the last show you've done, night and day difference?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Let me ask you a different question, because the show has progressed so much from those early days. Do you ever long for the simplicity of the early days, or do you enjoy the complexity at the production value and the product that you've produced now?
Both.
Yeah.
Both, for sure. I would say every show, both. Every show. You will probably hear me say, I'm never going to do this again. Who wants to buy this promotion? Every show. So, longing for the days when they were simpler, 100%. But then, you know, at fight night, after the show gets started, you're like, we put this together. This is why you do it. Yeah, this is why you do it. It's the highs and the lows on the fighters, you know, their appreciation of what we do for them, and getting fighters to where they want to go. That all of that is why we do it. It's
Your
not for the money.
your relationship with the fighters, was that something that kind of, let me rephrase this question. A lot of times the connective tissue of like friendship and competitors usually lies within like fighters and their gyms. Like I'm a fighter, I have an affiliation or an affection towards my gym mates. And sometimes the promotion can be someone that we have a relationship with, right? Or it can just be like a means to an end, right? So like the promotion can look at me as a labor source. They need fighters. And I look at them as an avenue for which I can actually perform. So we're kind of like a symbiotic relationship. It can be that basic, or it can be something as like meaningful as like, hey, I know the owners, they know me, we have like a friendship or a bond, and they'll kind of keep an eye out for matchups for me in case like to put a little extra effort to get me on that card. What is your relationship like with the gym owners and the fighters?
I mean, I think it's really a fine line. You know, I shouldn't say we try. Um, I probably am overly, not even overly. I would say probably most people or the fighters and the gym owners I would consider friends.
Hmm.
I don't know that they would consider me friends, but like, or like, maybe not like we're not the best of friends, but
You're
we're
friendly,
yeah, we're friendly.
cordial.
Which is a double-edged sword, really, because yeah, I'm always people probably wouldn't think this much too much of me, but I'm a real people pleaser. I want people to be happy, so I try really, really hard to do what's best for everybody in a situation, and that's including matching. Like, there are some fights that I absolutely hate to put together, but it's going to be a great fight. It's going to be a great fight
Because you know both fighters?
because I know both fighters, and I don't want any of them to lose.
Yeah.
Because you have that connection. I don't want a Logan Jones or a Derek Davis to lose because I like both those guys. You know, I've talked to both those guys. I've seen them in the gym. I know how much hard work they put in. I don't want either one of them to lose, but it's a great fight to put together. And that's that fine line where it's like, I take a lot of that to heart too. So when they lose and they're upset, I'm like, so
Yeah.
it's just, to me personally, it's hard. All of it's hard. It's hard, hard, hard.
While I agree in terms of the personal, because I also know a lot of these guys, and it's a weird feeling, right? You want to feel great for the person who won, but a lot of times you also know the person who lost. So like there's like this weird melancholy feeling. I'm happy, and then I'm also I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? It's weird, but I don't necessarily think that if that's at the amateur level, and forgive me of how I'm going to describe this, but it matters that much.
I agree.
The personal health side, I never want to see anybody. I want to see everybody be able to walk out of the cage, regardless of how the fight goes. I want them to be able to do that on their own. They don't need help in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, it's a very violent sport. It's not always the case. So my thing is always like, I just want to make sure these guys are like walking out of this. You know what I mean? But once you get to the pros, I actually think, and this is my stance, I'd be curious on what you think about it, because you're also like in the operations field of it. I don't think local pros should fight local pros.
I mean, I think at a certain point, that's correct. I think starting out, first 3, 4, I think you have to. You have to build that reputation for yourself as a ticket seller that people want to come see you. And then you have to sometimes.
But I'd make the argument that you do that in the amateur ranks.
I would agree.
Does that make sense?
I agree.
By the time I went pro, I didn't. My first pro fight was my 11th fight.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like how many pro fights do I need to have to like really solidify this? I agree. Before Tim enacted that 5-fight amateur, because we had seen some guys who had never had amateur fights go and fight pro. That's crazy, right? So then Tim enacts this I don't know if it's a law or if it's just like a regulatory thing. I guess it's a law. It's a rule. A rule where you can't fight professionally in the state of Missouri unless you have at least 5 fights and a winning record. I like that. So while I can understand the thought process, I would say that that is what you're doing in part and parcel of being an amateur. It is everything that you said about learning how to fight and putting the skills together and taking your training and like applying it and, you know, getting some of the kind of sharpening the tools, so to speak. But you're also building a name for yourself, building a reputation, building those bonds, building the promotions and everything. So that by the time you get to that pro level, let me put it this way. If you're a local pro and people don't know you, you did something wrong. Does that make sense?
I can see that. I mean, you also have a lot of local pros or local amateurs that fight out of town all the time. I mean, there's some gyms that fight more in Iowa than they do here. A lot.
Even at the amateur level?
Even at the amateur level.
Do you think that's just a constraint of like the number of promotions? Because back in the day, we had like 5 or 6. Now there's basically just 2 here in St. Louis.
I mean,
right?
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
It's part of it. I think it's also now, I think that COVID really did a number that we're seeing now that the scarcity of the fighter, of the opponent in our area. There's
Did the
not
number
as
of
many.
fighters just lower?
I believe so. And in the matching, you know, we go a lot more for out of town. We are going further and further out of town for amateur fighters as well as pro fighters these days, or expanding our area, I guess.
Do you think, I have so many questions I want to ask you on that, but I want to kind of finish this thought before we go to that. But I do want to ask about just like the nature or the health of MMA at a broader sense. But let's just stay here. Do you think that COVID forced fighters, like when you say COVID reduced the number of fighters, do you have like a basis or like a sort of nuanced take on why? Was it that fighters didn't have anywhere to fight now so that they were just focused on work? Or maybe was it because they couldn't train anymore, they just lost passion in the sport? Like when you say that there's just less fighters, what are some of the stories you hear?
I think it's multifaceted. I think, you know, closing down the gyms, people found other important things that they had to do for that period of time when they closed down gyms. Some promotions closed their doors forever. And then just, even though during that COVID time now, people are focusing more on work because they need to make money and they don't have enough time to train. I've been hearing that a lot more very recently than I've heard in a long time, and that's people that have been training and fighting for a long time.
So like the macroeconomic forces, it is just harder to live in America. Therefore, some of these luxuries like training to be an amateur fighter or like chasing a dream might not just be possible anymore.
Right. Yeah,
that's a shitty way to look at it, but I think you're probably onto something there. I mean, when I was young, I was broke, but I always assumed I was broke because I was in college. I was like, everybody's broke in college. So like when I was training as an amateur, like I wasn't getting paid for fighting. I was actually losing money because like, you know, traveling and paying for all these things that I needed, gloves, what have you. It cost me money to fight, right? But there was always this like thought in the back of my mind, like, it's okay, it's an investment. Like I'm putting into myself and all these other things. But that was also with this like silver lining that I could get by. I didn't have rent. I didn't have any of these things. I was still living with my dad.
Yeah, still had family support, which that's
when I moved out, after I got my degree, I had like my finances in order. I had a day job. I could live comfortably. I wasn't killing it, but I could live comfortably. But I remember like even then I could live comfortably and it was still hard because I was like, oh man, you know, I'm giving up overtime, or I could be doing like how much of my professional career suffered, my day job career suffered because I was pursuing this thing.
Yeah.
And that's for someone with the luxury of the finances being comfortable. Imagine if your finances are all over the place and you're barely getting by, and you know maybe you have a lady and a kid and like your wife is like, the fuck are you doing, dude? Go get a second job.
Right.
I
Or and you know, MMA is very different than other amateur sports in that, you know, parents pay for baseball and softball and all that for years and years and years for these kids, and that doesn't happen so much in MMA. You just don't have that support, family support, like other amateur quote unquote sports you would see, especially because these kids are
young
nearly
adults.
they're nearly adults already by the time they actually can fight. So
Yeah.
it's like you've grown out of your family support already too. So you just kind of fend for yourself.
Do you see? I personally think that the sport has plateaued. I think MMA in general has plateaued. And the precursor for why I think that are people that are much smarter than me shifting. So you start seeing when Dana White is starting to push slap fighting more, and you're seeing this like exodus into, you know, bare knuckle boxing, or now they're even Zuffa is now doing the not Zuffa, forgive me, WME IMG is now also going into the jiu-jitsu world. I think this is a telltale sign of like once you've kind of capped vertically, you start going horizontally, and I think MMA has plateaued at the highest level, and that's why they're kind of branching out to get some more market space and, you know, kind of grow that pie chart a little bit. But the precursor or the ramifications of like a plateauing market is like far stretched way below that, down to the amateur levels.
Yeah, and I think that the UFC kind of created some of that plateau.
Agreed.
With I think they did it with Contender Series.
Well, I also think it's just like they're a monopoly.
Well, 100% they're a monopoly. But when they created Contender Series, that took out a lot of the need for your LFAs, your Furies, your CFFCs. It took out a lot of that need because they're quote unquote building their own, even though they're not. But a lot of that, which then trickles down again in that LFA and the CFFCs and the Furies are pulling less from the local promotions. So those are not building as much. It's just a
cascading effect.
Yeah.
It's weird though, because I could also make the argument that fighters have never been better.
100%.
Right? So it's like simultaneously the talent pool is shrinking because you're saying that you're having trouble finding fights for people, and that you're having to branch out farther and farther even for amateur fights. Yet the product itself, I mean, I see amateurs now that could have beat up
100%.
pros from 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's a weird little dichotomy. The sport is evolving and growing in a sense, even if the market might be plateaued for that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But I think, logically speaking, it does make sense. Do you mind if we kind of go back to that thought about Contender Series regarding its impact on like your cage champs, your LFAs? I don't know if I necessarily agree, and here's why I say that. No one's going into the Contender Series 0-0 unless you're like the Bo Nichols or like the people that are coming from a high level amateur background, usually wrestling or jiu-jitsu. So they might not necessarily need like that whole build-up, but for 99.9% of the other fighters, they have records, right? Professional records.
They do, but they're a lot less than what they have ever been before. I mean, you're seeing your 4-0s, 5-0s just because they have the O on their record. I would say a lot of those are probably not ready at that point in time to be
in the UFC.
Yeah, even at a Contender Series level. Sure, they're ready for like the LFA, the Fight Pass levels, but my opinion is you need 2-3 fights at that level, and then
to see whether or not you can actually make it.
Yeah.
But what if I were to explain to you, and while I agree with you, what if I were to explain to you that the reason for that is because the UFC doesn't care?
I agree.
Make it to the UFC, sink or swim.
Yeah.
Lose 2 fights, we'll cut you. There's a row of other people that will gladly take that position.
I agree. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that model. I think I even as amateurs, I really, you know, it's about a lot of the time, being a mentor to these people too, because they don't all have the best mentors or even the best head on their shoulders all the time. And sometimes you don't just like, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you're not ready. You're not ready to go pro yet. Even though you've had your 5 fights, you need some improvement to be able to get those guys at that even entry pro level. And that's
But here's my return to that. Is that your place?
probably not. But I have that connection with those guys, and that's where I'm like, and I wouldn't say that I say that to everybody. Clearly,
Yeah, I'm not saying that this is like.
But I want what's best for them, and I'm going to let you know that I don't think that it's best for you. Can take my advice or not. That's your own decision. But I want to be real with everybody as much as possible. It's like, I don't know that you're ready for that step yet, because that level of competition, even just going from an amateur to a low-level pro or a beginning pro, leaps and bounds. Going from a local promotion to the LFAs or the Fight Pass,
The regional
leaps
ones.
and bounds. Going from LFA to the UFC, leaps and bounds difference. And I would say that a 4-0, 5-0, 6-0 fighter is not ready for that.
It comes into comparison too, because when I was talking to Mike flat out said that you don't need to take tough fights anymore as a pro. It used
And
to be.
I hate that.
Well, the competitor in me, the way I was as a fighter, I hate that. I do. However, the businessman in me, the one that wants to see these people make as much money as they can.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to both. The original path used to be beat everybody in your local scene, beat everybody in your regional scene, and then you cannot be denied the opportunity to fight on the grandest stage, right? Mm-hmm. But then in that pursuit, you're going to cut off a lot of people, because how many people can really be that guy, right? So then by the time you get to the UFC, you're like crushing all these other people. You might be 10-0 or 9-1 as a pro, and you get your UFC first shot, right? And then now you're in the promotion where everybody was the local killer. Everybody in the UFC was the guy that beat all the amateurs around them, and then beat all the pros around them, and then beat all the pros around them in a bigger circle. So that when you get to that level, you had this, at least, whether it was true or not, this confidence of like, I earned this, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. I want to be careful how I say the latter now. Because if what I said earlier is true, that the fighters have never been better, then I cannot say that they did not earn it, even if they apply themselves in a different path. So now what might happen is less amateur fights, because they've been training since they were like 10 years old in jiu-jitsu and boxing and all that, because the sport is just older now. You get to that 18, 19, you're seeing 20-year-olds now that are pros with like 5-0 records, right? Who is to deny them the opportunity if the promotion that they're trying to get into created an avenue for that in the Contender Series?
Yeah.
I've had guys say that they like it and dislike it for various reasons, and everyone's kind of in universal agreement that, the boxing mentality has won. You don't need to pad your record like they do in boxing. You got to get like 30-0 before you can get like a real fight, right? But you also don't necessarily need to take tough fights. You can be 4-0, flashy knockouts, flashy submissions. You might get tapped for the Contender Series. And instead of being great over the course of many years, you just have to be explosive and entertaining one night, and you could possibly get a contract or whatever it is that the guys are looking for, right? Maybe they're looking for like a specific behind the mic, frame, what have you. Do you think that the latter is just inferior to the former?
I don't know. I don't think either way
because more guys are in the UFC now, right? So you have more people making more money. I like that aspect.
I like that aspect. I want success for everybody, or as much as possible. But I just think it waters it down. I don't think as talented guys are in the UFC anymore.
But I don't know if we can say that, because we were in agreement that the fighters have never been better.
but everybody's never been better. So everybody's never been better. So that makes that even playing field there. So I would say that that's irrelevant, really, because
I don't know if I agree with
you're
that.
always looking for always looking for more and better than everybody's better.
I get that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if the total quality of fighters has been increasing, obviously because the sport is aging, right? So like you're going to take what was previously known, build upon it. Then I would venture to say that like a guy who's unranked in the UFC today, if you were to take him and put him 10 years ago, he might be the world champion. But the problem is the fighters are so strong and so competitive now that they might not even be ranked. They might get cut from the UFC because there's new guys coming in.
Yeah.
I don't know if when you say that the fighters have been diluted, do you mean like there's more fighters in the UFC?
Yeah, that's
so
what I
the
meant.
delta between number 1 and number 100 has never been wider. I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. And that's kind of the model that MMA has always been, is like you're local, you're regional, then you're going to I would consider LFA one of the best promotions outside of the UFC. So LFA is like just below the UFC to me, and then the UFC. But the UFC is kind of taking that model away, which is
Well, then let me ask
making
you.
it difficult for local and lower level promotions to survive.
But let me ask you this though, because like so you rest in peace Bellator, but you have other promotions that we've established. The UFC is a monopoly in the sense of like they're on mount on high by themselves, right? But then you have like PFL, ONE FC, and all these other things. Would you say that LFA is on par with them? Because I don't know if I would agree with that.
With ONE FC
And
and
PFL.
I would.
Really?
Their talent level, their production, they're traveling the world just like them. I would consider them
On par
on
with
par
those.
with them. Yeah.
Okay, so you'd lump all those as like
I
the
mean, I guess
B.
PFL would be. I would have done UFC, Bellator, LFA before, but now
It's a different world.
PFL is. I don't love their model personally. It's not as entertaining to me, so it's probably just a bias of mine.
I don't think there can be a competitor to the UFC because of the market, the way it's saturated and the way it is. I think you'll have much better success trying to be an LFA, the feeder league, than trying to be a PFL, a competitor league.
And that, honestly, that's for NFA. That was always what our goal was. Is when we started, we wanted to be an amateur league, feeding to other leagues in our area for pros, and then them to feed into LFA, LFA to feed into the UFC. That was our model, and now, I mean, we have a working relationship with LFA, so we talk to them fairly often, sending pros that have fought for us to them to go fight at LFA.
You've
So
also
it's
helped them out with like local shows and when they needed help, getting venues and stuff like that.
Yeah,
The factory.
we were the LFA's model is to use a local promoter. I would say most of the time, probably not all the time, to get fighters in the towns that they're in or in the locations they're in. So they work with the promotion that kind of a boots on the ground type.
Outsource some of that nuance to the people that know.
Yeah, so
It's
it's
wise.
I agree.
I mean, the bigger promotions do that as well.
Yeah, and that's where I would say that kind of USC is falling short, is that they're doing that with like the regional, but that's kind of putting those local, they're not putting enough investment into the even smaller promotions or even smaller training. They've got PIs now. There's not enough because eventually that's all gonna, in my opinion,
You've
away.
made the sport top heavy.
Yep.
It's never been better. There's never been a better time to be in the UFC. Simultaneously, it's never been worse to not.
Yeah, it's top heavy, and you know what happens when things are top heavy? They fall over, and that's why they are branching out horizontally.
Because they've plateaued.
They've seen it.
But is that a fault of the UFC? This is where I'm trying to get like. So let me play devil's advocate for a second. The UFC fighters have never made more money. So the arguments of old financially to entice people are slowly but surely losing a little steam as time goes on. Do the bottom fighters make enough to sustain themselves? Clearly not. But I mean, if you just take a look at the average salaries for fights, it's only been up and to the right. Since 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's only been up to the right. So the kids coming up now can feasibly look at MMA and say, like, this can be a career opportunity for me if I chose to go on this path. So in one respect, one would say that the UFC has actually helped to foster the sport by creating this avenue to actually make like real wealth to where you could retire after a lifetime of MMA. Maybe they can make that argument, right? Because we've seen a lot of guys get in 1-2 fights, get kicked out. They're not kicked out, but they get kicked out of the UFC.
Yeah.
Maybe fights didn't go their way. Maybe they weren't as good. Maybe they got in there too early, what have you. My thing is, and I'd be curious to hear what you say about this. I also think that is a reflection of the local promotions trying to do the same thing the UFC has done. In a lot of ways, kind of copy the mold that works at a high level, but might not necessarily work at the local level. For instance, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this. Like, why do you guys do as many fights as you do? Like, why not make the events smaller and then have more events? Is it because of like venue fees and like having to pay the state? Like, why have one big event with like 12 different fighters on it where there's a lot of variables and it's really hard to manage? Why not maybe do like 5 smaller shows where there's only 6 fights tonight? Maybe tickets are half the cost and it's like much more bite-sized and manageable.
Well, I don't know that it's a written rule, but there's a rule that you have to have at least 9 fights.
Oh, because of the state?
Yeah, for the state.
So what, I guess allocate the resources to that event?
Yeah, because, so that they pay their employees to come out.
But that's...
So you have to have at least 9 fights, which is, we've been at 9 fights. And it's really the cost aspect. Everything is...
It's more expensive.
Everything is more expensive. And we probably have a lot more expense than other people just because we want to do the production that we want to do. So it's like, if you're putting all that cost into one show, it's hard to spread that out, unless we had the ability, if we owned our own building, if we owned different things like that, that may be a model to do. But when we're renting and all those costs and, for us at NFA, not just me, but we have 0 full-time staff. So everyone else has other jobs and other duties and families and everything. So all that nuance of, a date that works for the whole team is basically not possible. So, some people, every show make, they choose to work with us than something else that they probably had going on. So it's a
project of passion from everybody, from you and Brad
everybody.
to the people in the back getting the gloves to the fighters.
Yeah, most everybody, like I said, the 80 to 100 people that work on a fight night are personal friends or like friends of friends or people in the MMA community that just want to be a part of. I would like it's not because everybody's making money.
It's not as glamorous as people might think it is.
It is not.
Is there one thing that you wish you would have known before you got into it? Is there like one hard lesson you and Brad had to learn hard lesson you learned the hard way, but a lesson that had to be learned the hard way that you wish you would have known beforehand? Like, what's something that people, like fighters or coaches, might not necessarily know about running a promotion?
I mean, there's so many things that they don't know about running a promotion. It's like, everybody, it's, I would say probably one of the biggest things is like, everybody is not going to be, quote unquote, loyal or think of you first like that you would think of them. I think that's been one of the hardest lessons that we've had it's, we're, I can only say for myself, like, I give and I give and I give to a lot of these guys, and it's not anything against them. It's like they're doing what's best for them, but that's not what's always best for me, and that sucks. So that's one of the hardest lessons that I would say is a lesson that I learn over and over again, and have to take that understanding too. But just as far as like things that a fighter or a coach or that they don't know, it's so many things. It's just the time that it takes to do this is astronomical. Like, I work a 40-hour work week. I probably work another 60, 80 hours beyond that 40 hours on MMA when we're in with a show coming up. So it's the time and the effort and the thought that really goes into a show, and every meticulous piece is thought about. There's a reason that we do what we do for everything. And that's maybe I don't always know what it is either. But there is one. There is a reason that everything is laid out the way that there's reasoning behind who's in a red corner or a blue corner. It's not just like thrown together. There's thought behind everything.
How much time do you spend on the fight card? Like, if you were to do a pie chart, how much time, let's say you spend 60 hours a week, how much of those 60 hours is spent on matching the fights, like you and Lance getting together and saying, like, this fight, that fight, get the bout agreement to this guy, talk to their coach, can we do it, right? Get, like, the actual logistics of getting fights together, one part. Production, like, what cameras are we going to use and who's going to do what and how many cameramen are we going to have and yada yada, right? How many announcers are we going to have, or the commentary team, who's going to be this show, right? So like you have the production side, the makeup of the card side, and then also like the venue side, right? Working with these venues, because like you don't own the factory, you don't own the armory, you don't own any of these places. You're working in conjunction with another company, and when dates make sense to them and what they can and can't do based on the reality of logistics and what you have with square footage and all this other stuff. If you were to just kind of high level, like how much of your time is spent in some of these endeavors, because like I think some people might think it's like a third each, right? A third on production, a third on this. Maybe it's like 60% of your time is just dealing with fighters, and 10% of your time is the venue and production. Maybe it's the other way around. I don't know.
I would say, for me personally, that probably of the 60 hours, 45 to 50 of those is matching, dealing with fighters, dealing with coaches.
So the vast majority of the
vast majority is talking with is making the fight happen. And then the other parts, I'm lucky that I have the production team that I have, because they really kind of, they take on that responsibility, and they would probably agree with me in this, that I'm a bit of a control freak too, so I want to know everything. So they take a lot of that and also deal with me wanting to know and give me that the information that I need to know, and run with the information. They'll just give me the idea and I'm like, cool, and then they run with it.
Well, but that's like Marlene. That's like any CEO. The CEO is not the one that's in the room while the decisions are being made. The CEO just wants to know why they were being made, so that they can, because you're the one navigating the ship, right? You're at the helm. You're navigating the ship. You're not steering pulling the ropes and getting all this other shit taken care of. Like you there's only so many hours in the week. There's only so many. There's only so much you can stay in the weeds. before. Now you're just micromanaging everything. Might as well just do it yourself. So I think that is the right approach, is to like, okay, guys, do what you think is right. And then like once a week, we have a meeting for an hour. Tell me what you're working on and why you did it the way you did it.
Yeah.
And maybe I have input, maybe I don't.
I think that I'm trying to move more and more in that direction, and letting my people do what they do
trust
best.
them?
Because yeah,
not just the production guys, but like the commentators, the announcers, the everything.
For sure. Yeah.
If
I trust all of
Macklin
them.
or Munch, whoever decides to work your show, right? If you trust them, by virtue or else, you're gonna run yourself into a wall.
Oh yeah.
Every show is gonna feel like, fuck my
like
life.
I want to quit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying more and more to do that. Just I don't know, a little bit of type A personality that I just want to have a finger on everything. I guess I don't know. I have a lot of opinions that probably my teams would say.
Yeah, but it's also keen for them to realize it, because this works both ways, right? You have to trust them, but they also have to understand you. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It's like, hey, she's the captain, she's the one steering the ship, so to speak, and I am a piece of this team, and I have my part, right? I think I can't speak too much on the promotion side, because I've never promoted a show, but I know that whenever I speak to entrepreneurs, some of what you're saying is like industry, like cross industry, like trusting people, not being micromanaging, and all these other things, and it's tough. It's fucking hard, especially if you care about what you're doing. You like, this is your baby, which all entrepreneurs feel like their business, their product is their baby. So I don't think it's crazy to be that way, or like, bad, quote unquote, as long as, and it sounds like you're doing this, you're moving towards that promised land of like, guys, I trust you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that trust has always been a difficult thing for myself, but I work really hard to do that. So it's.
Why do you say trust is difficult for you? Is it because of what we were talking about earlier, where you feel like you're doing stuff in the best interest of the fighters, and sometimes they don't reciprocate, so like you feel like trust isn't necessarily valued?
I mean, that's probably just another instance of, but that goes as far back as you can think of in childhood and all of that.
You as an individual.
Yeah, I'm technically an only child, so a lot of only childs feel like that they only have themselves to depend on as they're growing up. Mix that in with, parents that weren't necessarily the most, what's the word?
Supportive?
How do I want to? Not supportive. No, my parents loved me. They were supportive. They just got into things that took over their lives that was not putting their children first.
So they weren't as present as you wish they would have been.
Not even that I wish they would have been, because I, as an only child, would have depended on myself, and that's kind of where my mentality has always come from.
You've always had to rely on yourself, so it's difficult when you're told not to rely on yourself.
Yeah. Control freak.
I can understand that, but surely then you can come to the conclusion that in isolation that might serve to better you. But once you start getting to the point where this, you like, think about it logically. Even if you didn't have a day job, okay, if this was your only thing, could you do it all? No.
Absolutely not.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've established that you can't do it all. So then you can't try to do it all. Like, it's impossible.
Yeah. That's where I'm at, is that,
That's the rub.
letting go of those little things that I can let go. And then, like you said, as an entrepreneur, no one ever is going to work at it like you work at it, because it's yours.
I agree.
So when it's like those little disappointments where something didn't happen, it's like, I should have just done it myself. That kind of, it's a battle in my brain.
Yes, but here's a I'm going to present something to you. I would like to hear what you think of this. I've found that I get a lot more reception from people. You're right in your assertion that no one is going to care about something the way you do because it's yours. Do 100% you're correct. I found that whenever I've given, and this, it doesn't have to be equity. Equity works for me in my industries because it's just like the easiest, it's the low hanging fruit. But let's say, I'm trying to give, I'll use this podcast as an example. Let's say we worked in conjunction with one another, like my production crew was helping you. So not necessarily Matt and Matt, but like my production crew was helping you. You could come to me and be like, hey, listen, we're going to pay you like a salary or whatever, and we're going to say, you know, NFA at the end of the show, right, at the end of the pay-per-view, produced by Easy Talk. That doesn't offer a whole lot of like monetary value. But what that does is it like puts the name with your product. So now these people we would be like a little bit more invested. This is kind of like hyperbole, like an example. I'm not really sure, like, you know, with regards to like the commentators, I'm not sure how you could do that, right? And I would never tell you to like give equity to like 100 different people. That's unfeasible. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you think there's like avenues in which you can kind of spread that passion because it is yours a little more to some of these people so that you could feel like they're a little bit more present in the moment because now they have a little skin in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do that.
Okay.
Just for example, we have our production company that we use. They are in our like reel as as what a sponsor or like have connections with the promotion. So like we do that ish. I think there's always rooms for improvement.
Yeah.
Always room for improvement. So yeah, I think
does that make sense though?
100%.
Okay.
We are moving in that directions, and we've made movements to do that. You know, it's hard. It's hard, man.
Let me present to you a situation I have, and then maybe I can ask you for some advice. So right now with the podcast, we're actually zero revenue, right? So like all of this kind of comes from my pocket. But one of the things that I've stated with my crew is that like profitability is never really my aim with this, because I genuinely enjoy doing this. It's a lot of fucking fun. But I do naturally want this to generate revenue for obvious reasons, for like, you know, dedicating the time and commitment to it. Like I like having fun, but I also like hanging out with my family and all these other things.
Right.
But I've told my crew that like if revenue starts to come in and when that day comes, we'll have a distinct conversation about not necessarily like profit sharing, because the definition of profit, like we wouldn't exceed that, right? But yeah, like revenue sharing, like, hey, I'm paying you this much an hour right now, but if we hit this metric with the show, I'll pay you this much. If we hit this metric with the show, or we get this sponsor, we get this. My tie for the podcast will always be that like if this grows, you'll grow kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that's feasible in the long term, or do you think I would be too generous by constantly adding only additions? Because I'm not necessarily saying, well, okay, if we get like 1,000 views on this video, we'll double the pay. But what if we get 100? Can I pay them half? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think again that's a double-edged sword. That, you know,
legally speaking, I legally can't pay them half. Just that's preordained. Yeah, but you get where I'm trying to go.
The money
this.
Never goes down.
Yeah, it only goes up.
But yeah, I mean, I think
my producer right now is like, motherfucker, you paying me?
I think we use that model a lot. Maybe not necessarily like individually paying, but like, for example, if we hit these numbers in the pay-per-view, then more money goes towards the pay-per-view. Do that.
Oh, like in terms of like we have bigger budget now because we're seeing the money come in.
Right. We do with that.
Well, then you are paying them because the budget is them, right?
Right.
The production crew.
I mean, yes, a lot of that goes into like new gadgets and
Yeah.
different things. But yeah, it's
If you're paying them $5,000 versus $10,000, of course they're gonna pocket some of it. I get that, but then they might, with an extra $1,000, what else could they do?
right. So it's a again, it's that
a
fine
fine
line.
line.
It's that fine line of, you know, we're always wanting to improve the show, so like we'll put more money into a new slow motion gadget, whatever it is that that you asked for 2 shows ago. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. I don't know that it's not always been individual monetary,
Yeah.
which I would love to do across the board. It's just a
But you guys are operating on margins yourself. I'm not trying to get into the financials
Yeah.
of your business or anything like that, because it's neither here nor there. I guess my thing is also like, because like I have some things that I do, and I'm kind of cross industry. So like I have a logistics company. That's that's easy. Like that's so simple compared to some of these other things that I'm doing, where I'm like, and it could also be just because like, you know, when we started doing this, kind of similar to you, like I had an idea of it, and then I got into it, and I was like, oh my god, there's so much shit I didn't know. Thank
Yeah.
God for the mats, or else none of this would be possible. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I resonate with that kind of like hopeful vigor, and then boy does that brick wall fucking hurt when you hit it.
yeah, every time, every time.
I did want to bring up, because there's a variable in all this, and that's Brad Carey, who's your fiance. And you did not get into this alone, right? This was like in
No.
conjunction with him.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me? Let's take a step back. When you guys decided to buy Nemesis Fighting Alliance, did you and him sit down and think like, hey, why don't we do this ourselves? Did someone present that offer to you? Like, walk me through how you guys got to this stage.
So
Or
what?
got into this world, forgive me.
Yeah. So what happened is GFS, Jared Block's
Gateway
show,
Fighting Series.
Yeah, Jared Block's show kind of
Imploded.
disband, or he closed it, or whatever he did.
You said it much nicer than I did. Forgive me, Jared.
There was that lack of promotions in the area, and by that time Fight Hard was not doing anything either for quite some time, and a lot of things happened right around that time in 2018, and
there was also a lot of changes. There was a lot of changes in that time.
A lot of changes.
Like we were talking about, one such was the state getting involved in amateur MMA as well.
Yeah, so but he was doing pro shows, and a lot of we sponsored his show, so we went to all of the shows, and we were friendly with the state and judges and different people that are like, why aren't you guys doing this? Why aren't you guys doing this? Just over and over and over, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? I'm not sure why they thought we could, but just a lot of that.
Clearly you can.
I mean, yeah, we can, but why they were like, oh, you should be doing this, I don't know in the beginning. And finally, just in 2018, we were like, why aren't we? Like, could be fun. Famous last words, right? Famous last words. Like, why aren't we doing this? And then
it went from why aren't we to why are we?
yeah, it does happen that way sometimes. And then we sat down, and Brad's like, I'm busy. This is you. Like, if we're gonna do it, it's you gotta do this. And I was like, I don't have anything better to do, I guess. So we talked for
But you guys were
months
also
and months.
just dating at the time, right? Because or were you fiancé? Were you
No,
guys engaged
no.
back then?
No, we just got
That's a fucking commitment
we
with
just
a
got
boyfriend,
engaged
Marlene.
In 2023.
Listen,
so we've been together since 2007 and just got engaged in 2023.
If my wife wanted to get into business together, I would consider it. But if like my girlfriend was like, "Yo, let's do this thing," I'd be like,
that honestly, that was probably one of the only things that we were in together with for quite some time. So
oh damn, Brad, my bad.
we still separate bank accounts, separate things like that.
Do you want to do joint when you get married?
We have joint bank accounts, but we also have our own bank accounts. I'm fine with keeping it the way it is. It's been working for almost 20 years at this point. So
What do you
why
think about
break
the
it?
couples that say they need to like bank all their money together? Do you think that's good or bad?
I I don't have an opinion. You do what you want to do, really.
Boy, do I have an opinion.
I don't care. I don't think I that would not work for us because Brad is one that, he looks at his bank account every day. He knows exactly where all of
To
his
the
money
penny.
goes. And I'm like, there's still money in there. I can do what I want. Like,
Can I say something?
Yeah.
My wife's gonna kill me for saying this. We don't have a joint anything. The private portfolio's in my name. I have the trust for my daughter. It's all separated. And a part and parcel on why I did that was because my wife is also successful on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought process was always like, if we want to pool resources for something, then we can navigate those waters accordingly. Buying a house, doing whatever we want to do with that, right? We can get together. I can open up a checking account, and we can call that the Forever Home Fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we put in however much money we want to put in and see where it's at. But then we're not taking any money out. But I had a conversation with her. I was like, listen, if you want to open up a checking account that we pool money into, I can do that for you. But if you want like a credit card in my name, or you want like a debit card to like one of the checking accounts that I have, I'm like, that's just not going to happen. Because I'm like Brad. I can tell you to the penny what's in one of my accounts right now. I could tell you to the penny what's in the business account right now. And I would feel very confident in doing that. And I do get anxiety when I think about someone else having access to those funds who might not necessarily be understanding what I'm kind of contemplating or planning with those
Yeah.
funds. I've had men call me geniuses and women call me like every name under the book, but it works for us. My mentality
Yeah.
is this. If Bruna has to get to the point where she's asking me for money, first of all, anytime she's ever asked me for money, I've never said no. Here's this, here's that,
100%.
whatever.
Yeah.
But if she's like coming to me and she's like, I need $1,000, and I'm gonna be like, wait, you need $1,000 for what? For me. What are you doing with your money? Like, what are you spending your money on?
Right.
Like, there's a bigger question to ask for that. If it's like, I need $1,000 for this event or for that, for the baby, sure, no problem. I've never said no. But I do like that, and this is gonna sound kind of crazy, I do like that first tier of like at least asking me.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know about asking, but like
Or talking to me about
exactly.
it. I don't want to
It's
open up
having the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's Brad and I, like, we have our own primary bank accounts, and then businesses and everything, we both have access to everything. But like,
Do you talk to each other before you make transactions?
He would never pull anything from Nemesis without letting me know, and I would never want to touch anything with any of his businesses because no, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's just that conversation, like we move money around all the time to whatever's going where, different. I mean, we have multiple bank accounts for the same businesses, and it's just.
I don't know if this is also the case. Maybe I'm incorrect in this one, but I also think finances were just simpler before in previous generations.
Yeah.
When the average person could get by on, I hate to say it this way, back in the day where the woman was tend to be at home with the kids
There
and
was
was
no other
not
money.
working, and it was just the man working, it would make sense to have like a family bank account so
Yeah.
that like my wife could write a check and buy groceries without necessarily needing me to write the check for her. Like, that would make sense to me.
And that's one of the reasons that we are on all of our accounts is because, maybe I can get to the bank before he can get to the bank, so that I can just do that without anything being a pain in the butt. Is really the reason. Like, we're both on all of that. He's not on my bank account and I'm not on his bank account, but everything else, and the reason that we started a joint bank account was to pay for daycare.
Yeah.
So we both put in for daycare, and then we've just had that joint account for our son since then. And that's literally the only.
That's what I do with her, but we don't have a joint account. This is where I was going to get to. Like, with the advancement of technology, I just Venmo her now. Mm-hmm. On the first of every month. Well, actually, recently I've been paying our back taxes, so 2023 was a good year and a bad year at the same time.
Unknowingly.
Too good of a year. So, but no, that's what I would do. It's like, hey, on the first of every month, here's X amount of money, because it's like my half of the daycare, the groceries, these kinds of things. So like, because I agree with you. you don't want to get to the point where people are handling your finances without your knowledge, but you also don't want to get to the point where you're like nickel and diming for every little transaction, like, oh, 50% of this dinner.
Yeah.
I don't want to get to that point either, right? So it's like
We do
the
that
big
kinda.
ticket items,
Yeah.
here's half, and then everything else is just kind of like, you know, I got it, babe, don't worry about it, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
That's it's all about the conversation of like
There's girls now that will not get married unless,
that's crazy to me.
yeah,
I would I mean as a working person, I wouldn't want to not have my own bank account ever whether
Yeah.
I had a man or not.
yeah.
I just you have to think of your own security as well.
Yeah.
Personally,
Not even about anything like that, but like in case something happens. So here's the thing I will say. In the event of my untimely demise, I have I do have all of this squared away. And I update my will every 6 months. It's really easy once you make your first will, adjusting it is like cake. You know what I mean?
something we need to do.
Yeah, I would do. My mom died when she was 40, and we didn't have a whole lot of money. You know what I mean? So wasn't real need for a will. But I think to myself, like, I could leave here today and get hit by a semi truck, right?
Yep.
Like that can happen. And I would like to at least understand, or you know, I can rest easy knowing that all that shit is kind of in place, and it's actually relatively simple. It's like, you know, in the event of my death, my brother will get some money, my wife will get the rest of the money because my father's still alive. And if for any reason my father passes, then I will adjust that will to like my wife getting everything. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I have it set up because me and my brother kind of, my dad's retired. So there's like this responsibilities. You feel me?
Yeah.
I don't want to just like leave Andy with that. Be like, all right, have fun, buddy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I also want to make sure that my wife is getting the lion's share for obvious reasons. That's my daughter.
Right.
Forgive me to bring it back full circle with regards to the relationships. I'm just, you know, and I don't want to deviate too much. It's just that you guys are getting married, and simultaneously, I have like a lot of friends who are not getting married, and I know what worked for me. Can you elaborate on the high levels of what worked for you?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Brad and I have been together since 2007. Anybody with math? That is, I think.
Girl, did you put in the time?
July, this will be 19 years. So,
Played the long game.
I guess one or the other. No, it just wasn't important at any
Were
point.
either of you married before?
Nope.
Okay,
Neither
so
one
this
of us
is your
has
first
been married.
marriage. Okay.
We have a 15-year-old son, so we've
Been
been
there, done it.
together. Been together, so
Finally made an honest woman out of you.
I guess. I had one stipulation that I've told Brad since we've been together. I said, if we do not get married before my dad dies, we will have a problem. It will never be the same.
Yeah.
So.
Because you want your father at your wedding.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So that's the one thing that's ever been. And then he proposed in 2023, and it's 25 now. So.
Normally, I would not advise rushing the man. 19 years doesn't seem like much of a rush.
No.
A lot of women look at you as a saint. Brad. No, I know some people that same number, no ring.
Well, you know, and
that's kind of crazy.
I think it was never extremely important to us, I don't think. You know, Brad has been getting hell from
family
at
members.
least 10 years, probably. Family or anyone that knew that we weren't married. Like, the lion's share of people don't know that we're not married. So, he's been getting hell for it forever, and really, I think you're gonna laugh at this one. I don't know this for sure because I never asked, but I think the thing that really not pushed him, but was like, okay, maybe it's time, is that our accountant said there's no difference.
There's a lot of tax benefits.
Well, no, he said at this point there's no difference, and there's no tax benefit to not be married.
Yeah.
And then within a couple of years is when he proposed.
The logical male.
I have no proof that that's what that is, but I can assume.
I will say that I thought the tax benefits of marriage would be greater than what they were, and boy, did that bite me in the ass last year.
Well, for many, many years, having a child, not being married, the tax benefits.
Oh, for you?
For me, because I didn't.
Well, would you take? I don't want to say his name. Would you take your child as a dependent?
It depended on what our accountant said.
Yeah.
Especially
whoever would need it more based on earnings and stuff.
Yeah.
Smart accountant.
Yeah. So he would switch it back and forth, but for probably the first 7 to 10 years, it would always come to me because I work in mental health. There's no money in mental health. I have 2 businesses that there's no money in. Well, not businesses, but I work in 2 fields that there's no money in. So
I would consider NFA a business.
Well, NFA is a business, but mental health is.
Forgive me, other things
yeah,
got you.
Mental health isn't. There's no money in mental health. So I never have really had like high-paying jobs. So taking our son on our taxes always gave me a return.
Yeah.
So it
was always beneficial.
It's always been
it should
taxes.
Be. And it should be because you have a heightened expense load. The very first year, so we had our daughter before we got married. Mm-hmm. So that 1 year, Bruna got to be a single mom with a dependent, and she got like a fatty return, and I got destroyed that year. I was so mad. She like whatever I owed, she got in return, and I was like, okay, so it's like a net. That's why I fucked up on our finances last year. It's like in my mind, I was like, okay, like if she got this return and I owed this money, it should be a net wash, right? Boy, was I wrong because I didn't take into consideration like things like raises and additional revenue sources and all these other things. And not to make this about taxes, forgive me, we went down a rabbit hole. But I just, it was one of those things that kind of shocked me. There was like an idea of what I had, and then when I got the number, I was like,
yeah,
come again? Like, wait, hold up. Like, that's not what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, if you are someone that is around Brad and I often, taxes come up
all the time.
A lot. Brad is somebody that if there's a way to write it off, he's going to write it off.
Good. Yeah.
And we talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
So,
well, does he, I know that he's a realtor, but does he also get into like rental properties himself? Like, does he have like a portfolio of real estate?
We don't, but at the moment, but he has. We've done some back and forth.
Yeah.
If the right properties come up, then we will again.
Because getting that depreciation or that interest on the loan at the end of the year also fucking helps. Fun fact, you can up to $750,000 in real estate just for the state of Missouri alone, tax deductible. You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess actually we just bought another house that we're going to move into,
nice.
And our current house will be a rental. So, yes.
The depreciation on one home, the interest on that loan, unless you guys bought it cash and like you don't have a loan, but if you do have a loan, whatever that interest is, tax deductible at the end of the year.
Yeah, so it'll be helpful.
And Donnie T's back in the office, so I mean.
Yeah, he'll cut them taxes quick, right? No.
You guys are doing, forgive me for asking because I know all too well the fucking brutal nature of planning a wedding. You guys are planning a wedding while doing all this other shit too with like NFA.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
We're working on a show. Like we're finally starting to get another show in the works. Just bought a house in December that needs a lot of work to move into.
But that's good. That's what you want with real estate. You don't want to buy like an asset that you can't necessarily add value to.
Exactly. Also, Brad wants to have, the lowest prices for everything, so it's
good. Why is that a bad thing?
I agree, but
don't shit on my man. 19 years.
He also gave himself a time limit. We are now a month into that.
Yeah, that makes it a little tougher. Forgive me.
But so we have that we have to do work on the wedding. It's a destination wedding, so
that's a little bit easier.
It's easier in a sense, but also like you're planning everything without seeing anything that
Yeah,
trusting
but these resorts and stuff like that, they do a bunch.
They do.
I've never been to a bad destination wedding. Let me put it to you
Well,
that
how
way.
could you? It's vacation.
Fair, a little biased.
Hence why we're doing it.
But then you know what you can also do? You can invite like everybody you want. You can send out like 500 invitations and be like, well, if you want to come, pay for the airfare, pay for your resort fee and all that, by all means, you could be a +1. You know what I mean?
We did that in a sense. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't invite everybody.
Yeah, 500 is excessive.
But, because Brad is a realtor, we
Networks.
can't go anywhere ever without him knowing somebody. So he would invite the regional
world.
St. Louis area. I had to hone that in a bit, but yeah, that's basically what we did. We invited, all the family, all the friends, like, hey, if you can make it, we'd love for you to be there. If not, no hard feelings.
Then you'll also see, like, I hate saying it this way because there are some circumstances in which the economics are tough, but you can send out like 100 invites, and then the 20 people that decide to come, for a fact that they're there because they want to be there. They take the time, make the money, and all that other stuff. And like I said, I've never been to a bad destination wedding because I got this overwhelming feeling like everyone took effort to be there.
Yeah, and
so it just made that night
to
a little
support
bit.
you. Yeah, that 100%, and that's, there's always a hinge of disappointment where you're like, oh, I thought they were gonna book, but we get it.
Do you take it personally?
I mean,
a little bit.
How could you not? A little bit, but there is that understanding, like.
It is a little bit of an extra cost, though,
yeah,
right?
It's an extra cost. People are running their own businesses. They're doing all the things. I get it, but I was like, damn, I wanted you to be there, But no hard feelings, clearly. So, but yeah, right now we have like 40-ish people going to be there. So, it's going to be really fun, actually.
You guys making a week out of it?
We will be there 10 days, and
nice.
So we'll be there a couple days before and then the week after.
Oh, you're going to honeymoon there too?
Yeah.
Kind of,
I wouldn't really call it honeymoon. There's other people that are going to be there as
well. Gotcha.
So it's a vacation after.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call it a honeymoon. But
first half, wedding, second half.
Vacation, yeah. But, we've got people that are going to be there from 3 days to 7, so that it's kind of
sporadic
every day throughout the week. There will be people there coming and going. I don't remember where I was going with that, but it's a vacation, and that's the way that we presented it to everybody. It's a vacation for you guys, whether it's short or long. That's what we want it to be. Like, there's no dress code. We're not having a bridal party. No one else has any responsibilities to the wedding.
Let's come down and have fun.
Exactly. So it's
a vacation where we just happen to be getting married.
Where, again, I'm doing
most of the planning.
most of 99.9% of the planning of that as well. So it's like, control freak again.
My wife needs to be sitting here for the next part of this conversation. She's like, I get it, girl. No,
I think most do.
Here's the problem. When it was time for us to get married, I don't know if men will resonate when I say this. I think women had, ever since like they were young, this idea of their marriage, because I think it's just kind of like society kind of like brings them up that way. Where for men, there's no real like fantasy of that. Does that make sense? So like when it came time to planning it, first of all, my wife is just so much better at little stuff, like the plates and all this other stuff. I'm like,
who cares?
Are we not going to get, we're paying this much for the caterer and they're not bringing their own plates? So like, no, they're going to have their plates. This is like a plate we put.
Extra plate.
Yeah, like, no, it's like an under the plate plate. And I was like, what the fuck do you need under the plate plates for? Anyway, they look great. Like, in my head, it's like, this doesn't make logical sense. But then, like, you get to we had a beautiful wedding, so, like, everything, thank you, baby, you did a great job. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to say is, without getting killed tonight, she did a great job. I could not have done that. If you gave me 10 years to plan the wedding that she did in 6 months, I could not have done it. I would not have thought about the shit that she thought 100%. About. there's no way. She even got like a wedding planner involved like in the last month because she was like so stressed out about like all these things that she was forgetting. And I was like, we're forgetting shit? Because like all like the last 6 months has just been wedding, 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 wedding.
Yeah.
So I do not envy anybody planning their wedding. Also, holy shit, are they expensive?
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. Everything, no, nothing is hundreds of dollars anymore. It's instantly thousands of dollars. And I'm convinced it's because everyone from like the dress people to the caterers to all the venues, because they know, they're like, bitch,
They're going to spend the most money.
yeah, we know you're going to have to spend this money. We'll get a little skim off the top.
That's another reason that we did a destination wedding. Because
Financially makes sense.
number one, if we did it here, it would be way, way, way bigger than what it's going to be.
Off the record, I'll tell you what my wedding cost and what it could have cost. And
Yeah. It's insane.
it still eats me.
And I'll tell you what mine's going to cost.
Please don't. Please. I don't need that in my life right now. I'll give you an example. We're saving up for a Hever home, and like she's telling me like how much she wants to put on a down payment, and I was like, man, that extra thousands of dollars would have been real nice right now, wouldn't it?
That's one of the reasons.
And she was like, shut up. I was like, well, I'm just saying.
yeah, that's so one of the other reasons that we're doing the destination is one, just the amount of people and the cost. It's cheaper to do a destination wedding where everyone else is doing everything for you.
I hate that it's so expensive, and I don't know why it needs to be. I really don't.
I mean, you can do it cheaper, but you know that's the.
Tell my wife that.
It's.
Tell my wife that. I tried to tell my wife that.
It
my wife was like, "Come again."
It would not have. Wouldn't have happened like that if we were here. Not a chance. We would have been spending
stupid amounts.
Double.
Well, okay, but then I would say like, okay, let's say I am a wedding venue place, and this is like something that's being said. Maybe then it's like, well, how long can you continue to charge these prices before everyone starts going to destination weddings because it's just the more economical one now. It's not even about like what you think is going to be pro and con. It's just like I can't afford you.
I think
we
that's happening.
have to do it this way.
I think that's happening.
Yeah, I do too.
But you know, there's always there's only so many slots to availability, so
yeah,
it pulls people back here too. But it's
I'm glad those days are behind me, and
I will be excited as well. I will be excited as well. And again, type A personality, so I'm like, oh, this is cool. I want to do this. And then add another project. Oh, this is cool. I want to do that.
Do you think you put too much on your plate at times?
I think we as a couple always have too much on our plates. Always. We are rarely home between sports for our son. Brad's a realtor, so he works when everyone else is not working.
Yeah.
NFA, we have other ventures that we're doing. It's like we're never home. Never.
Do you like being busy?
Yes, I like being busy, but I also like not doing anything too. Like it's a.
You're two sides of the extremes.
Oh yeah.
I like being a couch potato, but I'm also handling 6 different things.
I can only do either side for so long before I need to switch it up a little bit for a while. So it's a.
I know that you guys are kind of like doing the whole NFA planning in conjunction with the wedding planning, but I guess once the wedding is done and behind you, you'll have some free time. What do you think that will mean for the projects that you have on your plate, like NFA and these things? In a broad way, I want to ask, like, what do you want to do with NFA? Like, do you want to try to outgrow the position you're in now? Do you just want to basically do this until you're done doing this? Like, what is your plan with NFA?
I don't know that we have like a extreme long-term plan. I think the plan's always just to be better than we were the last show, do better, do more exciting, more a lot of that we do in the production, more exciting, make things better and all the matchmaking, everything better. But like outgrowing it, I don't see that something that I want to do. We've had opportunities to kind of, you know, branch out to Texas or Memphis or a couple other places that
like
have,
cross state.
yeah, like all over, several all over, and I don't think I would be able to do that. It's not something that I'm extremely interested in, especially because the team that we have is all here. Again, they all have full-time jobs, and I don't know that I would want to do that. I've seen how LFA does that. It's crazy.
It's rough.
It's crazy. Yeah, like they have. It's insane. They start Friday shows typically. They're starting their production people and everything are starting to get there like Tuesday, and you know the ones
they're there all week.
They're there all week. They're doing something. Their crews are there. They're traveling. Like I say, we're never home now. They are never home. So I don't know that I'd want to be that.
And that's something that you ever committed to when you first got into compared to where you're at now. I think everyone could see that like there's definitely more on your plate from the Eagles Hall to the factory. One of the things I did want to actually ask you was, I mean, you guys have gone through a plethora of venues in those last 5 years, right?
Yeah.
A lot of what I would call, if you were to look at like NFA 1 to 5, to 10 to 15 to 20, they're going to notice kind of what you were saying. You always wanted to do the next show better than you did the last show. I think it's pretty evident, right? Mm-hmm. But in doing so, you've also, man, left yourself open to some pretty shocking turn of events, right? I hate to bring this up because it was kind of a pain in the ass, but when the Armory, which was your previous show, the most recent show that you guys have done, was at the factory in Chesterfield. The shows that you had done prior to that for, I believe you did, what, 3 or 4 shows?
We did 3 shows.
3 shows there. Armory. And we're planning on doing, I remember because you guys were having the conversations with the Armory about like getting a solidified, 2025 and roadmap, right? Like we want to get these dates in, solidified. And then literally like out of nowhere, right after the second to last show, they go out of business. And they went out of business 1 month before the next show.
Yeah, it was the day before my birthday that they shut down.
Happy birthday!
Yeah, it was a great birthday. Yeah, September 27th. I will never forget it. I promise. Yeah. So actually, literally the week before, we were sitting down talking about our 2025 at the Armory. 4 shows. Here's when we wanted to do it. Give us the dates that you got, and we'll figure that out. And then that day came. I had heard a thing here or there a month or 2 before, but
about the Armory,
there were rumblings of like
insolvency?
not of the Armory, but of their parent company. Having an issue. But I was like, we've been talking to the CEO a lot. They've assured us that that's not anything. And that day came, and, of course it was all over the internet, and people I didn't even know I knew reaching out. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. Let me call them.
We're figuring this out at the same time.
Yeah, I found out when everyone else found out on the internet that they actually shut their doors. And
what are your first thoughts? Oh shit.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
It's pretty defeating, really. Like, what the fuck are we gonna do? That was probably a couple days. Like, what?
What are we gonna do?
What the fuck are we gonna do?
You guys rallied though. I mean, when you. Obviously, losing the venue is tough because the show cannot happen without a physical location.
Yeah.
But on top of that, it's the kind of venue, right? So, like, if you go to a venue with like that can only house like 200 people, let's say, finding a replacement venue pretty easy. You can go to like any standard banquet hall and get that, right? The problem was also, if anyone had ever been to the Armory, it was absolutely massive. Mm-hmm. The wall that they had there, the production that you could have there, is just it's hard to find other venues of the same ilk. So it's not as easy as also finding finding a venue in a month is already hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing it under extreme circumstances of like stress, right? Because you have all the fighters contacting you and the sponsors contacting you and the people that bought tickets already contacting you like, what are we going to do? Are you going to honor my ticket? Am I going to get a refund? To find a venue in a month that is of the same ilk, going from the armory to the factory, talk about how that process happened, because you said that you did some work with LFA
Mm-hmm.
at the factory, so you already had some of those contacts there, some of those relationships. But was there ever like another venue that you guys were also looking at, or was it the factory right from the get go?
Oh yeah, we reached immediately. We reached out to every venue that we've ever been at. In St. Charles, downtown. We reached out to everybody that we've ever had contact with. Like,
You just
what
wanted
do you
to
got?
save the show.
Yeah, where that again, that people person in me is like, I don't do things, or I don't say things that I'm not gonna do. We said we're having this show. It's this date. It's gonna happen. Period. So it's just making that happen. So we reached out to them all, and we talked in depth to several, including the factory, and we were the pen stroke away from going somewhere else until something a detail popped out on us. They were like, no, you actually have to do this, and we were like,
It was a make or break for you guys.
yeah, it was a make or break it, and the factory was in our top. They were our second choice to go to after that, so we signed the dotted line with them. But yeah, just lucky that we have been putting in the work prior to this to always improve, and have had those contacts that we don't necessarily always want to stay in the same place, so maybe just keeping options open at any point in time really helped with that. And thank goodness they happened to have the date open miraculously, because they are
Packed.
busy. Their 2026 schedule is halfway through the year.
Wow, really?
So they're
God bless.
they're busy. So luckily they had that date open that we had already said was going to happen. That already had most of our card was already built. So that that saved us, is that most of the card was already built, because we had been planning we had time to do the matching and things, because we were going to be at the armory again, and that's where we were going to be. So we had already been working on that card for quite some time, so most of it was already done. So we didn't have a ton of issues with the card per se, that we had to change, or and thank goodness for the state too, that I didn't have to go change every bout agreement and put every document redone.
They were willing to work with you because they
Yeah.
understood that this is a shitty situation.
Yeah, so they knew, and they trusted us that the communication is there. We're not gonna. If anybody didn't want to fight, they wouldn't be fighting.
What did the armory say to you when you had that discussion with them? Like, yo, what is going on? What did they say to you?
The CEO's like, yeah, this is what happened. He basically said that he didn't know either, that he was told, I think 2 days before it happened, that it was happening. That's what they told us. Whether I believe that or not, it doesn't matter. But it's just sucked. It sucked.
Having that show at the factory, this most recent show, and getting to pull off the show, how did that feel for you and Brad? Considering, I don't think I've ever seen another promotion where the venue is like just collapses,
Yeah.
right? there's always been things that all promotions have to kind of go through. But I've never seen an instance where the specific venue went out of business a month before a show, and then you guys rallied and got it together. I'm sure it was stressful. I'm sure it was like a bunch of late nights and a bunch of phone calls, a bunch of fuck yous. But at the end of the day, you guys got the show done, dusted, and behind you. How did that night feel after you guys were done?
I mean, it's a real sense of accomplishment doing all of that, and just pulling it all off at the end of the night. It's always like, that's what we did, you know, and we'll always have that. Like, it's out there forever for everyone to see. Like, I think it was probably one of our best shows that we've ever done.
What goes into that when you say best show?
Production wise, the smoothness of the show, the way that the facility and our staff work together, fan entertainment, they're happy with the product that we put out. All of that kind of goes into it, in my opinion. I think that, you know, and just the mere feat of it happening.
Yeah, the fact that there was a show at all.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's...
Did the fighters say anything to you?
They were freaking out
Yeah.
at the beginning. I told them, I said, guys, give me 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks. I will have something for you. And it goes back to that relationship with the fighters and the coaches that, you know, they trusted us to be able to not book elsewhere, keep
back
moving
out
on,
and get another
back
fight.
out for those 2 weeks. That probably a scary 2 weeks for them too, because I'm asking for 2 weeks with a month left.
Yeah, 50% of the time.
50% of the time. So it's like, for that feat to happen as well is just a
testament.
Crazy situation. But I feel like we're NFA. Every situation we're in is a crazy situation. It's just we come up against barriers often and just bust through them.
Are you guys going to work with, because obviously the Armory's not coming back. You were last show at the factory. Is it safe to assume that the factory is going to be the next show, or how are you guys handling the next show?
The factory will be our next show.
Nice. So they were happy with you, you were happy with them,
yeah,
it all worked out?
Yeah, it was a good relationship. They liked what we were doing. Excuse me, they freely admitted that they are not a sports venue. So that it's very different. Yeah, but that
venue's pretty nice.
100%.
Yeah.
It's an extremely nice venue. But for a concert venue, like doing concerts and doing live sports is very, very different. And
I can see that.
Extremely different experience for their staff to be able to need to work with our staff as far as a live event goes, or a live sports goes, not just an event. They've done hundreds and thousands of events, but live sports is just very different. So
even in a controlled environment like cage fighting, in the sense of like it's pretty static, right? So like while I agree a live sporting event would be different and present itself different variables than, like, let's say a theater show, or, you know, a band coming in there doing live music. I hate saying it this way, but how much different can it be?
You would think. You would think.
She's like, yeah, I'm with you. But it is.
I would love for it to not be. No, the biggest difference is the timing. With a concert, yeah, they have the venue time. They have to be done by a quiet hour or whatever it is the venue set. But with live sports, you're on timing every second of that show. Like we have...
Well, even outside of the venue, even the state now, because, like, don't they charge you a certain amount of money after, like, 30... It's like you have the state for, what, 4 hours?
3.5.
3.5 hours. And for every 30 minutes after that, they're charging you now, what, like...
Per official.
Per official. So it could be anywhere between, like, what, $400 and $1,000 every 30 minutes. And let's just say like it is like none of these promotions are like making a whole lot of money doing this, right? So like if you're like an hour over, that might be your profit margin.
Yeah, yeah. It's timing is literally everything, and again, that goes back to my production team. Is they keep that timing. They are in control of what's going on. If somebody's talking on the mic, if they're pulling the next fight immediately, that like they are keeping that time, and that's the biggest difference. And you wouldn't think that it's a huge difference, but it really is.
No, Ray Hayes, when I had him on, I asked him because he had fought for like every promotion from like KC, St. Louis, Southern Illinois, what have you. You know what I mean? And he basically like announced, like he said that every promotion had pros and cons. But when he talked about NFA, he just basically said that like the one thing that he knew that was different about you guys was like he said the event, like that night, the production. He's like all of it is just like second to none. So he did give you guys the flowers in that respect, like that emphasis on the grandiose nature of the event was definitely present. Marlene, I want to say thank you for coming on. You're the first promoter to kind of take me up on my offer, and I know that it can be a little bit jarring or intimidating to kind of like lift up the hood a little bit, right? Because there is so much that goes into this, good, bad, and ugly, right?
Yeah.
I know for a fact I can say this that your presence is respected and admired by all the people like coaches, fighters, the state athletic commission themselves. When I talked to Tim, he had nothing but nice things to say about you and Brad. You know what I mean? Testament to the relationship. Mike Rogers and Mop and all these guys, nothing but nice things to say about NFA. Testament to the relationships. So you guys are doing something right. You know.
Yeah, we try. That's all we can do. Is the next step forward is all we're looking to do, really.
Before we end this conversation, if you don't mind, I was curious. What's 2025 looking like? So do we have the next show is going to be at the factory? Do you have any shows planned after that, or are you just doing it show to show right now?
We are working on getting specific dates set. We have a couple that I'm not ready to announce yet, but we're working on getting some down. Again, the factory had some. They're quite
Booked.
full, so we're working on getting that done as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
Because I know it's fighters are wanting more and more time now as well, and I would love to give it.
You mean more and more time for camp?
Yeah.
Like in between, like
Yeah.
from announcement of the date to.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I respect that, and I completely get it, and I would love to be able to provide it.
Well, I'm sure they'll take a fight on 8 weeks' notice over no fight at all. So.
Yeah, 100%. We'll get it
Marlene,
done.
I appreciate you being on Easy Talk. I hope it's what you thought it would be.
Yeah, exactly. I've loved everything that you've done previously, and I think it's right on par with those types of conversations. So,
Thank you so much.